Clara May Prescott dropped to her knees in the snow, her frozen fingers clawing at the sheriff's boots. "Please," she screamed, "she's all I have left." But they didn't stop. They carried her 6-month-old daughter up those courthouse steps like she was nothing more than a sack of grain. In Copper Creek, a dead man's debt meant a living woman's destruction. And mercy. Mercy cost more than Clara could pay. Stay with me until the end of this story. Subscribe to my channel and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The gavel would fall in 10 minutes. Clara knew this because Sheriff Hiram Boone had told her so. He'd said it the way a man might mention the weather. Casual, indifferent, like he wasn't about to sell her daughter to the highest bidder. "You can't do this." Clara's voice came out raw, scraped bloody from an hour of screaming. "She's a baby. She's not property." Boone didn't look at her. He was busy adjusting his hat in the reflection of the courthouse window, checking his teeth. "Your husband owed money to half this town, Mrs. Prescott. Bank, general store, even borrowed from Judge Blackwood himself." He finally turned, and his eyes held nothing. No pity, no guilt. Just the flat patience of a man who'd learned that poor folks' tears didn't pay debts. "Law says all assets of the estate can be seized. Baby counts as an asset. She's 6 months old. Old enough to be weaned. Old enough to work eventually." Boone shrugged. "Ain't my law, ma'am. Just my job to enforce it." Clara lunged at him. She didn't think about it, didn't plan it. Her body just moved, fingers hooked into claws, aiming for his face, for his eyes, for anything that would make him feel even a fraction of the pain tearing through her chest. Deputy Wheeler caught her from behind. His arms locked around her waist, lifting her clear off the ground while she thrashed and kicked. "Settle down now, Mrs. Prescott. Let me go. That's my daughter. That's my baby girl. And she'll be someone else's baby girl in about 9 minutes. Wheeler's voice held something Boone's didn't. A trace of discomfort, maybe even shame, but not enough to loosen his grip. "Make this easier on yourself. Accept what's coming." Clara went limp, not because she'd accepted anything, because she needed Wheeler to think she had. The moment his arms relaxed, she drove her elbow backward into his ribs. He grunted, his hold slipping, and Clara tore free. She ran for the courthouse steps, her worn boots slipping on the ice, her breath coming in white clouds that matched the snow falling around her. Grace was up there. Her daughter was up there in a wooden cradle that had belonged to Clara's mother, set on the top step like some kind of offering. Clara could hear her crying. That thin, reedy wail that meant she was cold, that meant she was hungry, that meant she wanted her mother. "Grace, Mama's coming, baby, Mama's." A hand closed around her arm and yanked her backward. She hit the frozen ground hard enough to see stars. When her vision cleared, Judge Solomon Blackwood was standing over her, and Clara felt her blood turn to ice water. He was tall, thin, dressed in a black wool coat that probably cost more than Clara's entire house. His silver-streaked hair was slicked back from a face that might have been handsome once before. Whatever lived behind his eyes ate away everything human. "Mrs. Prescott." His voice was soft, almost gentle. "That was the worst part. You're making a spectacle of yourself. You're selling my baby. I'm collecting on a legal debt. There's a difference." "There's no difference." Clara tried to get up, but Blackwood's cane pressed against her shoulder, pinning her down. The silver head of it, shaped like a crow's skull, dug into her collarbone. "Thomas is dead. He's been dead 4 months. You can't. Your husband borrowed $300 from my bank." Blackwood's tone never changed. Still soft, still gentle, still utterly devoid of mercy. "He used your land, your livestock, and your household goods as collateral. When he died, those debts became yours. When you failed to pay, the collateral was seized. The child is simply the final item on the inventory. She's not an item. She's a human being. She's property of the estate. The law is quite clear." Blackwood removed his cane from her shoulder and used it to gesture at the crowd gathering around the courthouse. These good people understand that. They understand that debts must be paid, that contracts must be honored. That's what separates civilization from savagery. Clara looked at the crowd. She saw the faces of her neighbors, the people she'd lived alongside for 3 years, the women she'd helped during childbirth, the men Thomas had worked beside in the mines, the children Grace would have grown up playing with. None of them would meet her eyes. Please. Clara turned back to Blackwood, and she hated herself for begging, hated that she had to crawl before this man who'd already taken everything else. But for Grace, she'd crawl. For Grace, she'd do anything. I'll work off the debt. I'll work for you, for the bank, for whoever you want. I'll sign over my land, my house. Already mine. Then I'll work the rest of my life. I'll pay back every penny plus interest. Just please, please don't take my daughter. Blackwood looked down at her for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes. Not compassion. Something colder. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. Mrs. Prescott, I have no interest in your labor. I have no interest in your land, which, as you noted, I already own. What I have interest in is this. He gestured at the courthouse, at the crowd, at the spectacle of a woman broken in the snow. Order. Examples. Reminders of what happens when people think they can take what isn't theirs without consequence. Thomas didn't steal anything. He borrowed from me. Blackwood leaned down, his face close to hers, his breath warm against her frozen cheek. And then he died before he could repay me. That's theft, Mrs. Prescott. Theft with extra steps. The child is my compensation. He straightened, brushing invisible dust from his coat. Sheriff Boone. We've kept these good people waiting long enough. Let's begin the auction. Clara screamed. It wasn't a word. Wasn't a plea. Just raw sound, torn from somewhere deeper than her throat, somewhere that held every fear and fury a mother could feel. She screamed until her voice broke, until blood filled her mouth, until hands grabbed her arms and legs and dragged her back from the steps. And through it all, Grace kept crying. That thin, reedy wail, the sound of a baby who wanted her mother. Lot number 1. Sheriff Boone stood at the top of the steps, his voice carrying across the silent square. One female infant approximately 6 months of age, healthy, no visible defects. Opening bid is $20. $20. Clara's daughter was worth $20. The crowd shifted. Some people were looking at the ground. Others were watching with the hungry curiosity of folks who'd come for entertainment and were getting more than they'd bargained for. $20, called a voice from the back. Old man Morrison, who ran the boarding house. He looked uncomfortable, but he'd raised his hand anyway. 25. Widow Hartley, who took in orphans to work her farm. She never looked uncomfortable about anything. 30. A minor Clara didn't recognize. Clara fought against the deputies holding her. Stop it! Stop it, all of you! What's wrong with you? No one answered. 35. Another voice. 40. 45. Each bid was a knife in Clara's chest. Each raised hand was a betrayal. These people knew her. They knew Grace. They'd held her baby cooed at her, told Clara what a beautiful daughter she had. Now they were bidding on her like livestock. $50. The square went silent. Judge Blackwood had raised his cane. $50. He repeated, his thin lips curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. And I'll settle the remainder of Mrs. Prescott's debts. All of them. Consider it an act of charity. Clara stopped struggling. Not because she'd given up, because she'd seen Blackwood's face when he made that bid. She'd seen what lived behind his eyes. This wasn't about debt. This wasn't about money. This was about something else entirely. Something that made Clara's skin crawl. Something that made her want to grab Grace and run until her legs gave out. Judge Blackwood bids $50 plus full debt settlement, Boone announced. Do I hear 60? Silence. Of course there was silence. No one in Copper Creek would outbid Judge Solomon Blackwood. No one would dare. 50 going once. Clara's heart stopped. 50 going twice. She couldn't breathe. Sold to... The gunshot split the world in half. Everyone dropped. Clara hit the ground on instinct, her hands going over her head, her body curling into itself. Around her, people were screaming, running, diving behind wagons and water troughs. When she looked up, she saw the bullet hole in the wooden post beside Boone's head, close enough that splinters had drawn blood from his cheek. And at the far end of the square, a rider. Clara's breath caught. He sat motionless on a gray stallion that stood 16 hands at least. The horse was as still as stone, as still as its rider, like both of them had been carved from the same frozen mountain. The man was huge. Even from this distance, Clara could see that. Shoulders that blocked out the sky behind him. A weathered coat of fur and leather. A wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face, and a rifle still smoking in his hands. What in the hell? Boone had drawn his pistol, but his hand was shaking. Who are you? Do you have any idea? The rider urged his horse forward. The hoofbeats echoed in the stunned silence. Slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat counting down to something no one wanted to see. As he drew closer, Clara made out more details. The beard dark and streaked with gray. The scar running from his temple to his jaw. The eyes. God, those eyes pale as winter ice, cold as the grave. He looked like something out of the old stories. The ones her grandmother used to tell about spirits who walked the mountains, judging the living, punishing the wicked. He looked like death come to collect. The rider stopped 10 feet from the courthouse steps. His gaze swept the crowd, the fleeing townspeople, the frozen deputies, the judge still standing with his cane raised like a weapon. Then those pale eyes found Clara, and something in them shifted. The child, he said. His voice was deep, rough, like stones grinding together in a riverbed. It wasn't loud, but somehow it carried across the entire square. The child ain't for sale, Boone tried. This is a legal proceeding. The child. The rider didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. How much? Blackwood stepped forward, his composure cracking for the first time. Now see here, this is none of your concern. I've already made a bid, and how much? The words fell like axe blows. Final. Absolute. Boone looked at Blackwood. Blackwood looked at Boone. Neither of them seemed to know what to do with a man who didn't flinch. $50 plus debt settlement, Boone finally said. $350 total. The rider reached into his coat. Half the crowd flinched. Deputy Wheeler went for his gun, then thought better of it when those pale eyes turned his direction. What came out of the rider's coat wasn't a weapon. It was a leather pouch. He tossed it at Boone's feet. It landed with a heavy metallic thud that echoed through the square. 600, the rider said. Gold. Twice your asking. Boone's eyes went wide. He crouched, opened the pouch with trembling fingers. Gold coins spilled across the frozen steps, gleaming in the thin winter light. Jesus Christ, Wheeler breathed. That's a fortune. This is absurd. Blackwood's voice had gone high tight. Sheriff, arrest this man. He discharged a firearm in town limits. He's interfering with legal proceedings. 600 in gold, Boone said slowly. He wasn't looking at Blackwood anymore. He was doing math in his head, and Clara knew exactly what kind of math it was. The kind that told a corrupt sheriff exactly how much of this fortune would end up in his pocket. That's more than fair compensation for the child and all associated debts. I won't stand for this. Blackwood turned to the crowd, to his men scattered among them. Someone stop him. Someone, judge. The rider's voice cut through Blackwood's hysteria like a knife through silk. You want to keep talking or you want to keep breathing? Pick one. Blackwood's mouth opened, closed, opened again. The rider's hand rested on his rifle. Casual, easy, like a man who'd killed before and wouldn't lose sleep over doing it again. "This isn't over," Blackwood finally said. His voice shook with fury. "I don't know who you are, stranger, but I own this town. I own the law, and I will find out everything about you, and I will... Looking forward to it." The rider dismounted. Clara watched him climb the courthouse steps, watched the deputies scramble out of his way, watched Boone press himself against the railing like he was trying to melt into the wood. The rider stopped beside the cradle. For a long moment, he just looked down at Grace. The baby had stopped crying. She was staring up at this massive stranger with wide, curious eyes, her tiny fist waving in the air. Something cracked in the rider's expression. Something old. Something wounded. Something that looked almost like grief. Then, with hands that could have crushed a man's skull, he lifted Grace from the cradle as gently as if she were made of glass. "She comes too," he said, nodding at Clara. Boone blinked. "What?" "The mother. She comes with the child." "Now wait just a minute." "She comes." The rider turned those pale eyes on Boone, and whatever the sheriff saw there made him take a step back. "Or you can keep your gold and your auction and see how that works out for you." Boone looked at Blackwood. Blackwood was already retreating toward his carriage, his face purple with rage, flanked by two of his men. "Fine," Boone spat. "Take them both. Just get out of my town." The rider descended the steps, with Grace cradled against his chest. He stopped in front of Clara, who was still on her knees in the snow, too stunned to move. "Can you ride?" His voice was gentler now. Still rough, but with something almost like concern underneath. Clara nodded. She wasn't sure she could actually ride, wasn't sure she could do anything except stare at this impossible man who'd materialized from nowhere to save her daughter. "Then get on the horse." She got on the horse. The rider handed Grace up to her, then swung into the saddle behind them. His arms came around both of them, taking the reins, and Clara felt the solid warmth of him at her back. A wall between her and the town that had tried to destroy her. "Wait." Clara turned. Martha Chen, the Chinese washerwoman, who'd been her only friend these past months, was pushing through the scattered crowd with a bundle in her arms. "For the baby." Martha pressed the bundle into Clara's hands, clothes, blankets, food. "And for you." "Martha." "Go." Martha's dark eyes were bright with tears. "Go before they change their minds." The rider kicked the horse into motion. As they rode out of Copper Creek's town square, Clara looked back one last time. She saw the faces of the people who'd watched her daughter being sold, some relieved, some ashamed. Most already looking away, already forgetting, already returning to their small lives. And she saw Judge Solomon Blackwood standing beside his black carriage, watching their departure with eyes like chips of flint. The look on his face made one thing perfectly clear. This was far from over. They rode in silence for hours. The mountains rose around them, white and silent. The snow falling steadily as the gray stallion climbed higher and higher into country Clara had never seen. The trail, if you could call it a trail, was barely wide enough for the horse, winding between massive pines and along ridges that dropped away into nothing. Grace had fallen asleep against Clara's chest, lulled by the horse's rhythm, and the warmth trapped between Clara's body and the stranger's arms. The stranger. Clara realized she didn't even know his name. "Who are you?" she finally asked. He didn't answer immediately, just kept guiding the horse along the treacherous path, his body moving with the animal like they were one creature. "Name's Ezra," he said at last. "Ezra Stone." "Why did you save us?" Another long pause. "You saved me once." Clara twisted in the saddle to look at him. Those pale eyes met hers, and something clicked into place. 8 years ago, a blizzard that had buried Copper Creek in 6 feet of snow. She'd been 18, newly married to Thomas, helping her father run the general store. She'd found a man half frozen in a drift behind the building, a giant of a man with a fever that should have killed him. Her father had wanted to leave him. "Mountain men are trouble," he'd said, more animal than human. But Clara had dragged the stranger inside, had nursed him back to health over 3 weeks, feeding him broth, changing his bandages, sitting vigil through the worst of the fever. He'd never spoken more than a few words. Had disappeared one morning before dawn, leaving nothing behind except a hand-carved wooden bird on her windowsill. She'd kept that bird, had worn it on a cord around her neck until Thomas had sold it to pay for mining equipment. "You remember," Clara breathed. "I remember everything." Ezra's jaw tightened. "You pulled me from the snow, brought me inside. Your father wanted to throw me back out. He was afraid. Smart man, should have been afraid." Something dark flickered across his face. "Should have let me die." "Why?" Ezra didn't answer. His arms tightened slightly around her protective, and he urged the horse faster up the mountain. But Clara had seen his face when he'd looked at Grace, had seen the grief cracking through his stone exterior, had seen the way his hands had trembled when he'd lifted her daughter from that cradle. This man wasn't just repaying a debt. This man was running from something, or maybe toward something. The sun was setting by the time they crested the final ridge. Below them, nestled in a valley between 2 peaks, sat a cabin. Solid, well-built, smoke rising from the chimney. Home, Clara thought, and then wondered where that thought had come from. "We'll be safe here," Ezra said. "For now." For now. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with everything he wasn't saying. Clara looked down at Grace, still sleeping peacefully, then back at the cabin that would shelter them from the storm, both the one falling from the sky and the one that would surely follow from Copper Creek. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving us." Ezra's only response was to guide the horse down toward the cabin. But Clara felt his arms tighten around her once more. And for the first time in 4 months, she felt something she'd thought was lost forever. She felt safe. The cabin door closed behind them, and Clara's legs gave out. She caught herself against the wall, Grace still clutched to her chest, her whole body shaking with the delayed shock of everything that had happened. The auction, the gunshot, the impossible rescue, the hours of riding through mountains that wanted to kill them. "Sit." Ezra's voice came from somewhere behind her. "Before you fall." Clara made it to a chair before her knees buckled completely. Grace stirred against her chest, making small, hungry sounds, and Clara realized with a jolt of panic that she had nothing. No milk, no food, no supplies except the bundle Martha had pressed into her hands. "Here." Ezra set a bowl in front of her. Warm water with mashed dried fruit. Beside it, a cup of broth that steamed in the cold air. "For the baby," he said. "She old enough for soft food." "Just barely." Clara's voice cracked. "How did you—" "Had a daughter once." The words fell between them like stones into deep water. Clara looked up at him, this mountain of a man who'd appeared from nowhere to save her child, and saw something in his face that made her chest ache. "Had—" she whispered. Ezra turned away. "Feed your baby. We'll talk after." He moved to the fireplace, building up the flames with movements that were too careful, too controlled. The movements of a man holding himself together by will alone. Clara fed Grace, slowly watching him work. The cabin was simple, but solid. One main room with a stone fireplace, a sleeping loft above shelves lined with books and supplies. Everything spoke of a man who'd built himself a fortress against the world. But there were other things too. A star-patterned quilt folded on the single chair. Dried wildflowers hanging from the rafters. A shelf of carved wooden animals, each one more beautiful than the last. Evidence of someone else's touch. Someone who wasn't here anymore. Grace finished eating and fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by the day's chaos. Clara found a safe spot for her near the fire, cushioned by blankets that smelled of cedar and something else. Something floral. A woman's scent faded by time, but not quite gone. "Your wife?" Clara asked softly. Ezra's hand stilled on the firewood. Wanietu, he said. The name came out like a prayer. Means winter in Cheyenne. She was the chief's daughter. Most beautiful woman I ever saw. His voice roughened. Not just her face, her spirit. She could track a deer through stone, deliver a breech birth, sing songs that'd make grown men weep. What happened to her? Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled. Outside, wind howled against the cabin walls. Cavalry, Ezra finally said. 9 years ago. They came through looking for hostiles. Some young fool had stirred up trouble 200 miles away, and suddenly every native camp was suspect. His hands clenched into fists. They demanded we relocate to a reservation. Chief refused. This was our land. We had treaties. They attacked. They slaughtered. The word came out flat. Dead. I was away hunting when it started. Came back to find the village burning. Found Wanietu dying in the snow, 3 bullets in her chest, still trying to crawl toward our lodge. His voice cracked. Still trying to reach our daughter. Clara's hand went to her mouth. Oh God. Winona was 2 years old. They took her with the other children, shipped them off to God knows where. Ezra turned, and Clara saw the devastation in his eyes. 9 years of searching. 9 years of failure. 9 years of grief that had turned him into the ghost she'd found dying in a snowdrift. I've spent every day since trying to find her. Every orphanage, every church, every fort that might have records. Nothing. Like she vanished into smoke. Ezra, when I saw you on those courthouse steps, he continued, his voice barely audible, screaming for your daughter while they tried to take her away, I saw Wanietu. I saw her dying in the snow, screaming for Winona, while soldiers dragged our baby away. His fists clenched. I was pinned down by 3 men, bleeding out from a gut wound. Couldn't move, couldn't help. Couldn't do a goddamn thing except watch them take my daughter and kill the woman I loved. Clara stood, crossed the space between them, put her hand on his arm. He flinched at the contact, but didn't pull away. You didn't fail them, she said. You were wounded. I failed. His voice was granite. And I've spent 9 years paying for it. Searching when I can. Surviving when I have to. He looked down at her, and something shifted in his expression. Waiting for a chance to make it right. Is that what today was? Maybe? His eyes found Grace sleeping peacefully by the fire. Or maybe I'm just tired of watching people get crushed by bastards like Blackwood and doing nothing about it. Clara didn't know what to say. Didn't know if there were words for this kind of pain, this kind of loss. So she did the only thing she could think of. She squeezed his arm and said, Thank you, for being the man who showed up. Ezra's jaw tightened. He nodded once, then pulled away. Get some sleep, he said gruffly. Loft's yours. I'll keep watch. Keep watch for what? Blackwood ain't the forgiving type. His men will be coming. Ezra checked the rifle by the door. Question is when, not if. Clara's blood chilled. How long do we have? Day, maybe 2. Snow's covering our tracks for now, but someone will talk. Someone always talks. He met her eyes. When they come, you take Grace and you run. There's a trading post 2 days north. Man named Old Bear. He'll help you get somewhere safe. What about you? I'll buy you time. No. Clara stepped forward. No, we're not separating. You didn't save us just to... I saved you because I couldn't save them. Ezra's voice was harsh. Don't make me watch another woman and child die because of me. That's not your choice to make. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. No one had argued with him in a long time. You're stubborn, he said. I'm alive. That's what stubborn people are. Clara lifted her chin. We survive this together, or we don't survive it at all. That's the deal. Ezra stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Your husband, he said. He know what he married. Thomas knew I was trouble the day he met me. Clara's voice softened. He loved me anyway, right up until the mine took him. Good man, weak man, kind heart, but weak. She looked at Grace. He borrowed money to chase dreams that never came true, left me drowning in debt and a daughter to raise alone. She paused. I loved him, but I'm not going to pretend he was something he wasn't. Ezra nodded slowly. Honest. I like that. Honest is all I've got left. They stood in silence for a moment, two people stripped down to nothing but their wounds and their will to survive. Get some sleep, Ezra said again, gentler this time. Tomorrow we plan. Tonight, we rest. Clara climbed the ladder to the loft Grace cradled against her chest. The bed up there was soft, piled with furs and blankets. She lay down and closed her eyes, expecting sleep to be impossible. But exhaustion pulled her under like a riptide. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was Ezra's voice, soft and low, humming something that sounded like a lullaby, a Cheyenne lullaby, for a daughter he couldn't stop searching for. Clara woke to voices. Not Ezra's voice. Other voices. Outside the cabin. She sat up fast, her heart slamming against her ribs. Grace stirred beside her, and Clara pressed a hand over her daughter's mouth before she could cry out. Below, she heard Ezra moving. The soft click of a rifle being cocked. Stay quiet, he called up to her. Don't come down. Clara grabbed Grace and pressed herself against the loft's far wall, making herself as small as possible. Through the gaps in the floorboards, she could see Ezra by the window, rifle raised. We know you're in there, mountain man. The voice came from outside, muffled by the cabin walls, but still clear enough. Judge Blackwood sends his regards. Clara's stomach dropped. They'd found them. Already. How? Got 5 men out here, the voice continued. You can come out peaceful hand over the woman and the kid, and maybe we let you live. Or we can burn you out. Your choice. Ezra's answer was to shatter the window with his rifle barrel and fire. Someone outside screamed. That's one, Ezra shouted. Any of you other boys want to try your luck? Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through the cabin walls, splintering wood, shattering glass. Clara curled around Grace, shielding her daughter with her body biting her lip until she tasted blood to keep from screaming. Below, Ezra was moving, firing, reloading, firing again. Another scream from outside. 2 down, Ezra called. 3 to go. Come on, boys, I've got all night. The shooting stopped. Silence fell, broken only by Grace's whimpering and Clara's ragged breathing. You're making a mistake, mountain man. A different voice this time. Older. Calmer. The judge doesn't want you dead. He wants the woman and child. Give them up and you can go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. Here's my counteroffer. Ezra's voice was ice. You turn around and ride back to Blackwood. Tell him if he sends anyone else, I'll nail their heads to his front porch. Then I'll come for him. A long pause. You're bluffing. Ask the 2 men bleeding in your snow if I'm bluffing. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, this ain't over. Judge Blackwood's got a long reach. You can't hide from him forever. Don't need forever. Just need long enough. Hoofbeats. Retreating into the night. Clara didn't move. Couldn't move. Her whole body was shaking, her arms locked around Grace so tight she worried she might hurt her. Clara! Ezra's voice came from below. They're gone. You can come down. She climbed down the ladder on legs that felt like water. Ezra was already boarding up the shattered window, blood dripping from a gash on his forearm where a splinter had caught him. You're hurt, Clara said. Scratch. He didn't look up. How's the baby? Scared, but fine. Clara set Grace down in the nest of blankets and crossed to Ezra. Let me see. I said it's... She grabbed his arm and turned it toward the firelight. The gash was deep, deeper than a scratch. Blood was flowing freely, soaking into his sleeve. Sit down, Clara ordered. Now! Something in her voice must have surprised him because he actually obeyed. Clara found clean cloth and water. She cleaned the wound with hands that had stopped shaking, packed with skill, born from 3 years of tending mining injuries. You've done this before, Ezra observed. Thomas got hurt a lot. Mines are dangerous. Clara wrapped the bandage tight. He was always coming home bleeding from something. He was lucky to have you. He was stupid to chase silver instead of appreciating what he had. Clara tied off the bandage with more force than necessary. But that's men for you, always wanting what's over the next hill instead of what's right in front of them. Ezra's mouth twitched again. Almost a smile. Not all men. No. Clara looked up at him. What do you want, Ezra Stone? The question hung between them. I want to find my daughter, he said quietly. I want to know she's alive, that she's safe, that she's... He swallowed hard. That she's somewhere better than where they took her. And after that, haven't thought that far ahead. He met her eyes. 9 years of searching doesn't leave much room for planning the future. Clara finished with the bandage and sat back on her heels. Then maybe it's time to start. Before he could answer, Grace let out a wail. Clara went to her daughter, scooping her up, rocking her gently. The baby had been through too much. They all had. But they were alive. They'd survived the night. We can't stay here, Ezra said. They'll be back. More of them next time. Where do we go? Ezra was quiet for a long moment. Then, there's a trading post, 2 days north. Man there owes me. He'll have information, supplies, maybe news about where Blackwood's men are positioned. And then we figure out our next move. Ezra stood, testing his bandaged arm. You said we survived together or not at all. You still mean that? Every word. Then we leave at dawn. Travel light. Move fast. He looked at Grace. Can she handle hard riding? She'll have to. Ezra nodded. Something in his expression shifted. Not quite warmth, but something close. Respect, maybe. Recognition of a kindred spirit. Get what rest you can, he said. It's going to be a long few days. Clara didn't sleep. She sat by the fire with Grace in her arms, watching the embers glow, listening to the wind howl outside. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. But when dawn finally broke, and Ezra opened the cabin door to check the trail, Clara was ready. She had nothing left to lose, and everything to fight for. They rode out as the sun crested the eastern peaks, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose. Ezra had packed light, just essentials. Weapons, food, blankets for Grace. Everything else he left behind, without a backward glance. You're abandoning your home, Clara said. It's just a building. His voice was flat. I've left plenty of buildings behind. But Clara had seen him pause at the door, had seen his hand brush the star-patterned quilt, the carved wooden animals, the dried flowers Juanietu had probably hung there 9 years ago. He wasn't abandoning a building. He was abandoning a grave. They traveled in silence, climbing higher into terrain that grew wilder with every mile. The trail disappeared, entirely replaced by deer paths and rock scrambles that made Clara's heart stop with every slip of the horse's hooves. But Ezra navigated it all with the ease of long practice. This was his world, his territory. Here among the peaks and pines, he was something more than human. Here even Blackwood's money couldn't touch them. By midday, Grace was fussing, hungry and cold, despite the blankets wrapped around her. Clara's arms ached from holding her, and her back screamed from hours in the saddle. We need to stop, she said. Not yet. Another hour. Ezra, she needs another hour. His voice was sharp. There's a cave ahead, sheltered. We can rest there. Clara bit back her argument. He knew this country. She didn't. And right now trust was all she had. The cave appeared exactly where Ezra had said it would be, hidden behind a stand of snow-laden pines. It was small but dry, with evidence of previous use. A fire ring, a stack of seasoned wood, even a cache of supplies buried under loose stones. "You planned this," Clara said, as Ezra built a fire. "This whole route. I plan everything." He didn't look up. "Learned a long time ago that hoping for the best gets people killed." Clara fed Grace while Ezra cooked something over the fire. The smell made her stomach growl. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. "Here." He handed her a plate of beans and salt pork. Simple food, but it tasted like heaven. They ate in silence, Grace dozing between them, the fire casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. "Tell me about her," Clara said finally. "Winona. What was she like?" Ezra's hand stopped halfway to his mouth. "You don't have to," Clara added quickly. "I just thought she was fearless." The word came out rough, like it hurt to say. "Even at 2 years old. Juanietu used to say she had the spirit of a mountain lion, always climbing things, always getting into trouble." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "She had her mother's eyes, dark, deep, like they could see right through you." "She sounds wonderful." "She was everything." Ezra set down his plate. "When they took her, they took the only part of me worth saving." Clara reached across the space between them and touched his hand. He flinched but didn't pull away. "We'll find her," Clara said. "I don't know how, but we will." "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise I'll help you try." She squeezed his hand. "You saved my daughter. Let me help you find yours." Ezra looked at her for a long moment. Something cracked in his expression. Something that had been frozen for 9 years. "Why?" he asked. "Because that's what people do. The good ones, anyway." Clara pulled her hand back. "They help each other. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Silence fell between them. But it was a different kind of silence now. Not the cold silence of strangers, but the warm silence of people who understood each other's pain. The fire crackled, the wind howled outside, and somewhere in the distance, Clara thought she heard hoofbeats. Ezra's head snapped up. His hand went to his rifle. "Stay here," he said, and disappeared into the snow. Clara pulled Grace close, her heart hammering. Minutes stretched like hours. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Then Ezra reappeared at the cave mouth, and his expression made Clara's blood run cold. "We need to move. Now." "What is it?" "Riders. 8 of them, coming up the eastern trail." He was already kicking snow over the fire-gathering supplies. "They're not Blackwood's men." "Then who?" Ezra met her eyes, and what she saw there made her stomach drop. Worse. He lifted Grace into her arms and pulled her toward the back of the cave, where a crack in the rock opened into darkness. "There's a passage," he said. "Comes out 1/2 mile north. It's narrow, but we can make it." "What about the horse?" "Horse stays. Has to." His jaw tightened. "Move." Clara moved. The passage was exactly as narrow as Ezra had warned. Clara had to turn sideways in places. Grace pressed against her chest, the rock scraping her back and shoulders. Ezra went first, holding a small torch that cast barely enough light to see by. "Who are they?" Clara gasped between tight squeezes. "The riders." "Bounty hunters." Ezra's voice echoed off the stone. "Blackwood must have put out a price." "How much?" "Enough to bring professionals." They emerged on a rocky ledge, overlooking a valley Clara had never seen. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and red, and below them, barely visible through the trees, 8 riders were circling the cave they'd just escaped. "They'll find the passage," Clara said. "Eventually." Ezra was already scanning the terrain ahead. "But we've got a head start now. Come on." They ran. Clara had never run like this. Through snow that grabbed at her ankles, over rocks that threatened to twist her feet, down slopes that wanted to send her tumbling into nothing. Grace wailed against her chest, frightened by the motion, but Clara couldn't stop to comfort her. Couldn't stop for anything. Behind them, shouts. The bounty hunters had found the passage. "Faster," Ezra urged. Clara pushed harder. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed, but she kept moving. For Grace, for the man who'd saved them, for the hope that somewhere ahead was safety. Night fell fast in the mountains. By the time full dark had claimed the world, Clara couldn't see her hand in front of her face. But Ezra kept moving, guiding her by voice and touch through terrain that would have killed her if she'd been alone. "How can you see?" she gasped. "I can't. I know." His hand found hers in the darkness. "Trust me." She did. They finally stopped in a hollow between two massive boulders, the rock walls blocking the wind and hiding them from pursuit. Clara collapsed against the stone. Grace clutched to her chest, her whole body shaking with exhaustion. "They won't follow in the dark," Ezra said. "Too dangerous. We've got until dawn." "And then?" "Then we keep running." He sat down beside her close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Trading post is still a day away. If we push hard, we can make it before they catch up." Clara leaned her head back against the rock. "How long can we keep running?" "Long as it takes." "And what happens when we stop? When there's nowhere left to run?" Ezra was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, almost vulnerable. "Then we fight." Clara turned her head to look at him, though she could barely make out his silhouette in the darkness. "Together?" she asked. "Together." The word hung between them, warm, despite the freezing air. Grace had finally stopped crying, exhausted into sleep. Clara held her close, feeling the small heartbeat against her own. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "Any of this. I just wanted to raise my daughter. Give her a good life. Nobody asks for the hard things." Ezra's voice was rough. "They just come, and you either survive them or you don't." "Is that what you've been doing for 9 years? Surviving?" "Barely." Clara reached out in the darkness and found his hand again. This time, he didn't flinch. "Maybe it's time to start living again," she said. Ezra's fingers closed around hers. "Maybe," he said. And in the darkness of a mountain hollow hunted by men who wanted them dead, two broken people held onto each other and waited for dawn. Dawn came gray and cold, and with it the sound Clara had been dreading. Hoofbeats. Distant but closing. "They found our trail." Ezra was already pulling her to her feet. "Move!" Clara's legs screamed in protest. Every muscle in her body begged for rest. But she forced herself forward. Grace pressed tight against her chest, following Ezra through terrain that seemed designed to kill them. They ran for 2 hours. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer. Clara could hear voices now, men shouting to each other, coordinating their pursuit. "Ezra!" she gasped. "I can't." "You can." He grabbed her arm, half dragging her up a steep incline. "Trading post is just over that ridge. We make it there, we've got a chance." Clara didn't ask what happened if they didn't make it. She already knew. They crested the ridge as the first rider appeared behind them. "There!" someone shouted. "I see them!" Gunfire cracked through the morning air. Clara felt something whistle past her ear, close enough to feel the heat. "Down!" Ezra shoved her behind a boulder, putting his body between her and the shooters. He returned fire, and Clara heard a hoarse scream. "Go!" He pointed toward a cluster of buildings visible in the valley below. "Get to the trading post. Ask for Old Bear. Tell him Ezra Stone sent you." "I'm not leaving you." "You are." He fired again. Grace needs her mother alive. Go. Clara hesitated for one terrible second. Then she ran. She didn't look back. Couldn't look back. Just kept her eyes on those buildings, kept her legs pumping, kept Grace shielded against her chest. Behind her, gunfire continued. Then stopped. Clara's heart seized. She burst through the trading post door, startling a massive native man who was sorting furs behind the counter. "Old Bear," Clara gasped. "Ezra Stone, he sent me. There are men." The man was already moving. He grabbed a rifle from the wall and shouldered past her, disappearing into the morning. Clara collapsed against the counter, her whole body shaking. Grace was crying, scared by the running and the noise and her mother's terror. "Hush, baby," Clara whispered, though her own voice trembled. "It's okay. It's okay." But it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. Minutes passed. They felt like hours. Then the door opened, and Ezra stumbled through. He was bleeding. A gash across his forehead painted half his face red. But he was alive. He was alive. "They're gone," Old Bear said, following him inside. "Killed two, the rest ran." Clara threw herself at Ezra without thinking. Her arms wrapped around him, Grace pressed between them, and she held on like he might disappear if she let go. "You're alive," she breathed. "God, you're alive." Ezra's arms came around her slowly, uncertain, like he'd forgotten how to accept comfort. "Told you to run," he said gruffly. "I did run. I ran here." Clara pulled back to look at him. "Don't you ever tell me to leave you again?" Something flickered in his pale eyes. Something that might have been wonder. "Yes, ma'am." Old Bear cleared his throat. "The woman has fire. I like her." Ezra almost smiled. "She's trouble." "Good trouble," Clara corrected. "Now sit down before you bleed to death." She cleaned and bandaged his wound, while Old Bear made coffee and Grace gradually calmed in a makeshift crib by the fire. The trading post was cluttered but warm, filled with furs and supplies and the smell of tobacco smoke. "Bounty hunters," Old Bear said when Clara finished her work. "Professional ones. Blackwood's offering $500 for the woman and child. Another $300 for you, Ezra. Dead or alive. $800. Clara's stomach turned. "For us. You embarrassed a powerful man. Powerful men don't forget." Old Bear poured 3 cups of coffee. "You need to disappear. Both of you. Somewhere Blackwood can't reach." "Where?" Ezra asked. "His money reaches everywhere." "Not everywhere." Old Bear leaned forward. "I have news. News you've been waiting 9 years to hear." Ezra went still. Completely, utterly still. "What news?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Your daughter, Winona." Old Bear's dark eyes were solemn. "I know where she is." The world stopped. Clara saw Ezra's face transform, saw hope and terror and desperate longing war across his features, saw 9 years of searching, 9 years of failure, 9 years of grief crack open in a single moment. "Where?" The word came out broken. "Copper Creek." Old Bear held up a hand as Ezra lurched to his feet. "Wait. Listen. There's an orphanage there on the edge of town. Run by a woman named Adelaide Crane, Blackwood's cousin. The judge's cousin has my daughter. She takes in native children. Children the government doesn't want to deal with. She changes their names, erases their histories, works them like slaves." Old Bear's expression darkened. "Your Winona is there. She's been there for 9 years. They call her Sarah now." Clara watched Ezra process this, watched him realize that his daughter had been in Copper Creek the whole time, the same town where Clara had lived, the same town where Blackwood had tried to sell her baby. "How do you know it's her?" Ezra's voice shook. "How can you be sure? My nephew worked as a scout at Fort Collins. He was there when they processed the children from your village. He saw which ones went where." Old Bear reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. 3 children were young enough to pass for white. 2 went east. 1 went to Copper Creek. He handed the paper to Ezra. He remembered a birthmark, maple leaf shape behind her left ear. Ezra's hand trembled as he took the paper. "That's her," he breathed. "God, that's her." Clara moved to his side, reading over his shoulder. Official documents, transfer orders. A name, Sarah Whitmore, and a destination. Copper Creek Children's Asylum. "She's been there the whole time," Ezra said. "While I was searching everywhere else, she was right there." "You couldn't have known." Clara touched his arm. "The records were buried, hidden. I should have looked harder, should have—" "You looked for 9 years, you never stopped." Clara's voice was firm. "And now you know where she is. Now we can get her back." Ezra looked at her. You think I'm letting you do this alone. Clara, this is my fight. You've got Grace to think about. You should take her somewhere safe. Somewhere. Somewhere like where?" Clara cut him off. "Blackwood's got bounty hunters after us. There's nowhere safe until he's stopped. And your daughter is in that man's family's hands." She lifted her chin. "We finish this together, all of it." Old Bear nodded approvingly. "Like I said, good trouble." Ezra stared at Clara for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Together," he said. They spent 3 days at the trading post planning and preparing. Old Bear provided supplies, weapons, and information. The asylum was on the edge of Copper Creek past the old silver mine. Mrs. Crane kept 30 to 40 children there at any time, working them in exchange for government money that mostly went into her pocket and Blackwood's. "She's his cousin," Old Bear explained. "Does his dirty work. Takes children he wants disappeared, loans them out for labor in his mines. Anyone asks questions, they get told the children ran away. And no one stops her." Clara's voice shook with fury. "Who would stop her? Sheriff's in Blackwood's pocket. Town's scared of him. The children have no one to speak for them." "They have us now," Ezra said grimly. The plan they developed was dangerous, reckless maybe, but it was the only option they had. Clara would return to Copper Creek first, posing as a widow, seeking work at the asylum. She'd done domestic work before. It wouldn't be hard to convince Mrs. Crane she was desperate enough to take any job. Once inside, she'd find Winona, verify the birthmark, build the girls' trust. Then Ezra would come for them. "I don't like it," Ezra said on the night before Clara was set to leave. "You walking into that place alone?" "I won't be alone. I'll have Grace. That's supposed to make me feel better. A woman with a baby is invisible, non-threatening. No one will look twice at me." Clara touched his face, a gesture that had become natural over the past days. "I can do this, Ezra. Let me help. And if something goes wrong, then you come in and tear the place apart." She almost smiled. "You're good at that." Ezra caught her hand, held it against his cheek. "Clara." His voice was rough. "These past days I know." She stepped closer. "Me too." They stood like that for a long moment, foreheads almost touching, breathing the same air. "When this is over," Ezra said quietly, "when Winona's safe and Blackwood's finished, ask me then." Clara pulled back, her eyes bright. "Ask me whatever you want to ask me then. And if I don't survive, then I'll be very angry with you." Her voice cracked. "So don't die. That's an order." "Yes, ma'am." Clara left at dawn, riding one of Old Bear's horses with Grace bundled against her chest. The journey back to Copper Creek took 2 days. 2 days of jumping at every sound, watching every shadow, expecting bounty hunters around every corner. But no one came. When she finally saw Copper Creek's buildings in the distance, Clara almost laughed at the irony. A week ago, she'd fled this town with nothing but her daughter and a stranger's protection. Now she was riding back into the lion's den. The asylum was exactly where Old Bear had described. a gray, forbidding building that seemed to crouch at the edge of town like something waiting to pounce. Clara tied her horse outside and climbed the steps on legs that wanted to tremble. She knocked. The woman who answered was tall and angular, with a face like a hatchet, and eyes that catalogued Clara's worn clothes and desperate expression in a single glance. "Mrs. Crane." Clara made her voice small, humble. "My name's Clara Wilson. My husband died in the mines last month. I've got no family, no money, and a baby to feed. I heard you sometimes hire women to help with the children." Mrs. Crane's thin lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I do take on help occasionally. The work is hard, the pay is minimal, and the children here are not normal children. They're savages, most of them, half-breeds and runaways. Do you have a problem with that?" Clara thought of Juanita dying in the snow for her daughter. Thought of Winona trapped in this place for 9 years. "No, ma'am. I just need the work." "Very well. You can start tomorrow. 6 in the morning. Don't be late." And just like that, Clara was inside. The asylum was worse than she'd imagined. Children as young as 6 worked from dawn until dark, scrubbing floors, doing laundry, cooking meals. Their clothes were threadbare, their faces hollow. They moved in silence, trained not to speak unless spoken to, trained not to hope for anything better than survival. Clara's first week was spent watching, learning the routines, identifying which children were which age, and looking for Winona. She found her on the 8th day. The girl was in the laundry room stirring a massive pot of boiling water. She was small for 11, thin and hollow-cheeked, with dark hair pulled back in a severe braid. But her eyes, God. Her eyes were pale gray, just like Ezra's. And they held the same fierce light, the same stubborn refusal to break. Clara's heart stopped. She waited until they were alone, until the other children had filed out for their evening meal. "What's your name?" Clara asked softly. The girl looked at her with wary suspicion. "Sarah." "Is that the name you were born with?" Something flickered in those gray eyes. Fear. Hope. Both. "Why are you asking me that?" Clara glanced at the door, making sure they were truly alone. "Because I know someone who's been looking for you, for 9 years. Someone who never stopped searching." Sarah Winona went very still. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You have a birthmark behind your left ear, shaped like a maple leaf." The girl's hand flew to her ear instinctively, then dropped. Her face had gone pale. "How do you know about that?" "Because your father told me. Your real father, Ezra Stone." The name hit the girl like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, knocking into the washpot, barely catching herself. "That's not Mrs. Crane says my parents are dead. She says I was abandoned. She says she lied." Clara stepped closer, keeping her voice low and urgent. "Your mother's name was Juanita. It means winter. She was killed by soldiers when you were 2 years old. Your father was wounded trying to protect you. By the time he recovered, you were gone." Winona's eyes filled with tears. No, that's not. He spent 9 years looking for you, every orphanage, every fort, every church. He never stopped, never gave up." Clara's own eyes were burning. "And he's here now, waiting, ready to take you home. Home." The word came out broken. "I don't have a home. You do now." Clara reached out slowly, giving the girl time to pull away. When she didn't, Clara touched her shoulder gently. "If you want it." Winona stared at her for a long moment. 9 years of walls, 9 years of protecting herself from hope, warred with something deeper. Something that remembered a father's voice, a mother's song, a life stolen before she could understand it. "I remember something," she whispered. "A song. About mountains and rivers. Someone used to sing it to me." Clara's throat tightened. "That was your mother. Your father still sings it sometimes. At night when he thinks no one can hear." Tears spilled down Winona's cheeks. "What do I have to do?" Trust me. Can you do that?" The girl looked at Clara, really looked, and saw something that made her decision. Yes. They planned in stolen moments over the next 3 days. Clara learned the asylum's routines, its weak points, its patterns. Mrs. Crane retired early most nights, taking a sleeping draft for her back pain. The guards, 2 men who watched the perimeter, changed shifts at midnight. Ezra was waiting in the mountains, ready to move the moment Clara sent word. Everything was in place. And then, everything went wrong. On the 4th night, Mrs. Crane summoned Clara to her office. "Sit down, Mrs. Wilson." Her voice was ice. Or should I say, Mrs. Prescott? Clara's blood froze. "I don't know what—" "Don't." Mrs. Crane held up a piece of paper. A wanted poster with Clara's face on it. "My cousin has been looking for you." Imagine my surprise when I realized the desperate widow I'd hired was the same woman who'd caused him such trouble. Clara's hand moved toward the door. "I wouldn't." Mrs. Crane produced a small pistol from her desk. "My cousin is on his way. He's very eager to see you again." Her thin lips curved. "And to meet your daughter." Grace. Grace was in the servants' quarters being watched by one of the older children. "Please." Clara's voice shook. "Please leave my daughter out of this." "That's not up to me. It's up to Solomon." Mrs. Crane's eyes glittered with malice. "He has such plans for your little family, Mrs. Prescott. Such creative plans." Clara had one chance. She took it. She grabbed the oil lamp from Mrs. Crane's desk and hurled it at the window. Glass shattered. Fire bloomed. Mrs. Crane screamed and ducked, and Clara ran. She sprinted through the asylum's dark corridors, alarms already rising behind her. Children were waking, confused and frightened. Guards were shouting. Clara found Grace in the servants' quarters, scooped her up, and kept running. "Sarah!" She screamed the name as she passed the dormitory. "Sarah now!" Winona appeared from the darkness, her face pale but determined. "This way." The girl grabbed Clara's arm. "There's a passage. Mrs. Crane doesn't know about it." They ran through a door Clara hadn't noticed, down a narrow stairway, into a basement that smelled of mold and desperation. "The older children use it sometimes," Winona explained, pushing aside a rotted board to reveal a gap in the foundation. "To get out when things get too bad." They squeezed through into the cold night air and found themselves face to face with Judge Solomon Blackwood. "Mrs. Prescott." He smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Clara had ever seen. "How nice of you to save me the trouble of searching the building." Behind him stood 6 men with rifles. Clara pulled Winona behind her, shielding both girls with her body. "You can't have them," she said. "Either of them. I think you'll find I can have whatever I want." Blackwood stepped closer. "This is my town, Mrs. Prescott. My law. My rules." His eyes moved to Winona. "And that is my property." "She's not property. She's a child. She's an orphan. A half-breed orphan at that. Worth less than the food it costs to feed her." Blackwood shrugged. "But she has her uses. My cousin finds her quite valuable for certain tasks." Clara's stomach turned. "You're a monster." "I'm a businessman." Blackwood raised his hand, signaling his men. "Take them. All 3. Clara closed her eyes. "Please," she thought. "Please." The gunshot came from behind Blackwood. One of his men dropped, clutching his shoulder. Then another. And then Ezra Stone walked out of the darkness like vengeance made flesh. "Let them go." His voice was ice and iron, and his rifle was already trained on Blackwood's chest. "You." Blackwood's composure cracked. "How did you?" "Old Bear has good scouts. They've been watching the roads for days." Ezra stepped closer, and Blackwood's remaining men scattered backward. "Saw you riding for town. Figured you weren't coming for the scenery. You're 1 man against 6. Then you better hope your men are willing to die for you." Ezra's eyes never left Blackwood's face. Because I am absolutely willing to kill for them." He meant it. Clara could see it in every line of his body. And so could Blackwood. "This isn't over," the judge hissed. "No," Ezra agreed. "It isn't. But right now, you're going to walk away. And you're going to keep walking. Because if I ever see your face again, I'll put a bullet through it." Blackwood's face contorted with rage. But he was a coward at his core. And cowards knew when to retreat. "This isn't over," he repeated. Then he turned and walked away, his men following like whipped dogs. Clara's legs gave out. She would have fallen if Ezra hadn't caught her, one arm around her waist, the other reaching for Winona. "It's okay," he said, his voice rough. "I've got you. Both of you." Winona stared at him, her gray eyes, his eyes wide with shock and recognition. "You're real," she whispered. "You're actually real." "I'm real." Ezra's voice cracked. "I'm here, and I'm never leaving you again." Winona threw herself into his arms. Clara watched tears streaming down her face as father and daughter held each other for the first time in 9 years. Watched Ezra shake with sobs he couldn't contain. Watched Winona cling to him like he might disappear if she let go. Grace began to cry, overwhelmed by the emotion around her. And somehow, impossibly, they were all laughing and crying at the same time. "We need to move," Ezra finally said, his voice still rough. "Blackwood won't stay gone long." "Where do we go?" Clara asked. Ezra looked at her, looked at Winona, looked at Grace. "Home," he said. "We go home." They didn't make it far. Halfway to the mountains, Ezra's horse stumbled. He caught himself on the saddle horn, but Clara saw the blood soaking through his coat. "You're hit." She pulled her horse alongside his. "Ezra, you're bleeding." "Scratch." His voice was tight. "Keep moving." "That's not a scratch. That's—" "Clara." He met her eyes, and she saw the pain he was trying to hide. "We stop. Now we die. Keep moving." They kept moving, but Ezra grew weaker with every mile. His grip on the reins loosened. His body swayed. Twice Clara had to grab his arm to keep him from falling. Winona rode behind Clara, holding Grace, her young face tight with fear. "Is he going to die?" she whispered. "No." Clara's voice was fiercer than she felt. "I won't let him." They reached Old Bear's trading post as dawn broke. Ezra collapsed the moment they stopped sliding from his horse, like a puppet with cut strings. "Help!" Clara screamed. "Old Bear, help us!" The massive native man appeared instantly, taking in the situation with a single glance. He lifted Ezra like he weighed nothing and carried him inside. "Bullet's still in him." Old Bear laid Ezra on a table, cutting away his blood-soaked shirt. "Deep, near the lung. Can you get it out?" "Maybe." His dark eyes met hers. "But it's going to hurt, and he might not survive." Clara looked at Ezra's pale face, at the man who'd saved her daughter. Found his own, and taken a bullet protecting them all. "Do it." The next 2 hours were the longest of Clara's life. She held Ezra down while Old Bear worked her hands slick with his blood, her voice raw from talking to him, begging him to stay, to fight to live. Winona kept Grace in the other room, singing softly to keep the baby calm. The same mountain song Ezra had taught her in broken moments over the past days. The sound drifted through the walls, and Clara saw Ezra's face twitch at the sound. "That's your daughter," she told him. "She's singing your wife's song. She's alive because of you. Grace is alive because of you. So you don't get to die. You hear me? You don't get to leave us." Old Bear pulled the bullet free with a wet, sucking sound. Ezra screamed. His back arched off the table. Then he went limp. "Is he—" Clara couldn't finish the question. Old Bear pressed his ear to Ezra's chest, listened, straightened. "Alive. For now. The next day will tell." Clara collapsed into a chair, her whole body shaking. She'd held herself together through the escape, through the ride, through the surgery. Now finally, she broke. She sobbed until she had nothing left. Then she washed her hands, straightened her spine, and went to take care of her girls. Ezra drifted in darkness. He heard voices sometimes. Clara's sharp with worry. Winona's soft with fear. A baby crying. Old Bear's low rumble. And underneath it all, a song. A Cheyenne lullaby about mountains and rivers. Wanietu's song. He tried to follow it, but the darkness kept pulling him down. Then a small hand slipped into his. "You have to wake up." Winona's voice fierce despite its trembling. "You found me. You're not allowed to leave now." Ezra tried to speak. Couldn't. "I remember you," Winona continued. "I didn't think I did, but I do. I remember your hands, how big they were, how safe I felt when you held me." Her voice cracked. "I remember the song. I remember the stars on Mama's blanket. I remember feeling loved." Her grip tightened. "I spent 9 years thinking no one wanted me. 9 years believing I was worthless. And then Clara told me the truth. She told me you never stopped searching, never stopped loving me." Tears fell on his hand. "So you don't get to die. You don't get to leave me again. Please, please wake up." Ezra forced his eyes open. Winona's face swam above him, streaked with tears, pale with exhaustion. "Hey," he managed. His voice was a ragged whisper. "Little wolf." Winona's sob was half laugh, half cry. "You remember. You called me that when I was small. Remember everything." Ezra tried to lift his hand, couldn't. "You have your mother's eyes. Everyone says I have yours." Got her spirit, though, her fire. He managed something like a smile. "She'd be proud of you, surviving what you survived, staying strong." "I wasn't strong. I just didn't have a choice. That's what strength is." Ezra's eyes drifted closed, then forced themselves open again. "Where's Clara Grace?" "Here." Clara appeared beside Winona Grace in her arms. "We're all here. We're all safe. Blackwood. Gone. For now." Clara sat on the edge of the table, her free hand finding his. "Old Bear's scouts say he's retreated to Copper Creek. Gathering men. Planning something. He'll come. I know. Have to stop him." Ezra tried to sit up, fell back with a groan. "Can't let him. You can't do anything until you heal." Clara's voice was firm. "And before you argue, remember that I'm the one who held you together while Old Bear dug a bullet out of your chest. I've earned the right to give orders." Something that might have been a laugh escaped Ezra's cracked lips. "Bossy. Stubborn. Good match." His eyes met hers, and despite the pain, despite everything, warmth flickered in their depths. "When this is over." "I remember." Clara squeezed his hand. "Ask me then." Ezra slept. When he woke again, 3 days had passed. His body screamed with every movement, but the fever had broken, and the wound was healing clean. Old Bear's medicine was powerful. "You're lucky," Old Bear said, checking the bandages. "Another inch to the left, you'd be dead. Been lucky my whole life." Ezra's voice was still rough. "Lucky enough to lose everything and survive. Some kind of luck. You found your daughter, found a woman who'd fight for you, found a second chance." Old Bear met his eyes. "That's not luck. That's something else." "What?" "Grace." The word held weight. The kind that has to be earned. Ezra thought about that as Old Bear left. Thought about 9 years of searching. Thought about Clara dragging him from the snow all those years ago. Thought about the chain of choices and chances that had brought them all to this moment. Maybe Old Bear was right. Maybe this was Grace. If so, he wasn't going to waste it. "You're thinking too hard." Clara appeared with a bowl of broth. "I can hear it from across the room." "Thinking about Blackwood. About what comes next. You're supposed to be resting. I've rested enough. Ezra pushed himself upright, ignoring the fire in his side. He's not going to stop Clara. Not until he's destroyed us. It's not about the money anymore. It's about pride. About power. About making an example. I know. Clara set down the broth. That's why I've been planning. Planning what? The end of Solomon Blackwood. Ezra stared at her. This woman who'd been broken on the courthouse steps 2 weeks ago. This woman who'd begged for mercy from people who had none. Now, her eyes were steel. What kind of plan? Clara sat beside him. Blackwood's power comes from fear. Everyone's afraid of him. The town, the sheriff, even his own men. They follow him because they think he can't be beaten. He can't. Not in a straight fight. He's got too many resources. Then we don't fight straight. Clara's voice was cold, certain. We expose him. Everything he's done. The fraud at the asylum, the stolen children, the abuse, the corruption. We get evidence and we take it to someone who can't be bought. Who the sheriff's in his pocket. The territorial judge owes him. The federal marshal, Morrison. He's been investigating corruption in the territory for years. Old Bear has contacts who can reach him. Clara leaned forward. If we can get proof, real proof of what's happening at that asylum, Morrison will have no choice but to act. And once Blackwood falls, everyone who's been afraid of him will turn. Ezra considered this. It was risky. It meant going back to Copper Creek, back into the lion's den. But it might work. What kind of proof do we need, Bia? Records. Mrs. Crane keeps files on every child. Where they came from. How much the government pays for their care. Where the money really goes. Winona says she's seen them. Knows where they're kept. You want to break into the asylum. I want to burn it down. Clara's voice hardened. But yes. First we get the records. Ezra looked at her for a long moment. Then he started to laugh. It hurt. God, it hurt. But he couldn't stop. What's funny? Clara demanded. You. Ezra shook his head. 2 weeks ago you were begging for mercy. Now you're planning to take down the most powerful man in the territory. 2 weeks ago I had something to lose. Now I've got nothing but things to fight for. Clara's chin lifted. There's a difference. Hell of a difference. Ezra reached out, caught her hand. All right. We do this together, but we do it smart. No rushing in, no getting killed. That's been the plan all along. Just making sure we're clear. He squeezed her hand. Because when this is over, I've got questions to ask you, and I'd like us both to be alive for the answers. Clara's expression softened. So would I. They spent the next week preparing. Ezra healed faster than anyone expected, driven by purpose he hadn't felt in 9 years. He trained with his rifle until his aim was sharp again. He studied maps of Copper Creek until he could navigate it blindfolded. And he learned his daughter. Winona was wary at first. 9 years of walls didn't come down easily. She watched him from a distance, answered his questions in short sentences, kept herself contained. But slowly, carefully, the walls began to crack. It happened in small moments. A shared meal, where she almost smiled. A question about her mother that led to an hour of stories. A nightmare that sent her screaming from sleep, and Ezra there to hold her singing the mountain song until she calmed. I don't remember her face, Winona confessed one night. Mama's face. I try, but it's just blur. She had eyes like midnight. Deep and dark, like you could fall into them and never hit bottom. Ezra's voice was rough with memory, and a smile that could light up the whole sky. Did she love me? More than anything in this world. Did you? The question broke something in Ezra's chest. I still do, he said. I never stopped. Not for a single day. Not for a single moment. You were always with me, little wolf. Even when I couldn't find you. Winona was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, she leaned against his side. "I want to remember," she whispered. "I want to remember everything." "You will." Ezra put his arm around her. "We've got time now. All the time in the world." But they both knew that wasn't quite true. Not yet. Not while Blackwood still breathed. The plan came together piece by piece. Old Bear's contacts confirmed that Marshal Morrison was investigating corruption in Copper Creek. He just needed evidence. Proof that couldn't be denied. Clara would go in first. She still had access to the asylum, still knew its routines. She'd get the records and get out. Ezra would provide backup. Watch the perimeter. Extract her if things went wrong. Winona wanted to come. No. Ezra's response was immediate. Final. "I know that building better than anyone. I know where Mrs. Crane keeps her keys. I know which floorboards creak." "You're 11 years old." "I'm 11 years old, and I survived that place for 9 years. Winona's gray eyes, his eyes blazed with determination. "Those children are still in there. Children who protected me, who shared their food with me, who held me when I cried. I'm not abandoning them." "You're not abandoning anyone. You're staying safe." "Safe?" Winona's voice cracked. "I've never been safe. Not once in my entire life. At least this way I'm fighting back." Ezra looked at Clara, hoping for support. Clara shrugged. "She's your daughter." "That's not helping." "I'm not trying to help. I'm trying to point out that she's exactly as stubborn as you are." Clara almost smiled. "Also, she's right. She knows that building better than we do." Ezra stared at them both. His daughter and this woman who'd somehow become essential to his existence. "If anything happens to you," he told Winona, "I will never forgive myself." "Then make sure nothing happens to me." Winona lifted her chin. "You've got 9 years of protecting to make up for. Start now." They left for Copper Creek 4 days later. Old Bear stayed behind with Grace. It was the hardest thing Clara had ever done, walking away from her daughter. But Grace was safer here, away from the danger. And Clara had made a promise. They'd finish this together. The journey took 2 days, moving slowly to avoid Blackwood's patrols. They saw riders twice, but managed to stay hidden both times. On the second night, camped in a ravine outside town, Clara found herself unable to sleep. She sat by the dying fire, watching the stars, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. "Can't sleep either," Ezra settled beside her. "Too much thinking." "About what?" "Everything. Grace. Tomorrow. What happens if this goes wrong?" Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "What happens if we succeed?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what comes after? Blackwood falls, the asylum closes, the children are rescued. Then what? Where do we go? What do we do?" Ezra was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out something small. A carved wooden bird, wings spread in flight. Clara's breath caught. "That's found it in your things. Back in Copper Creek, before everything went wrong." He turned it over in his massive hands. "You kept it, all these years." "It was the only beautiful thing I owned, the only thing that wasn't practical." Clara's voice trembled. "Thomas sold it for mining equipment. I thought it was gone forever." "I made another one." Ezra pressed it into her hands. "For you. For after." Clara looked at the carving. It was exquisite, even more detailed than the first. A bird in flight wings, catching an invisible wind, every feather perfectly rendered. "Ezra, what comes after," he said quietly, "is whatever we want it to be. A cabin in the mountains. A family. A life." He met her eyes. "I know it's too soon. I know we're in the middle of a war. But I need you to know that when I asked what happens after, I was asking about us. You and me. Winona and Grace. Together." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Is that what you want?" It's all I want." His voice roughened. "For 9 years I've had nothing to live for except searching. Now I've got everything to live for. I'm not letting it go." Clara leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was fierce and desperate, and full of everything they hadn't said. 9 years of loneliness, meeting 2 weeks of terror, meeting a hope neither of them had dared to feel. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Ask me," Clara whispered. "Ask you what?" "Whatever you were going to ask me when this is over. Ask me now." Ezra's hands cupped her face. "Stay with me. Not just for tonight. Not just until we're safe. Stay with me forever. Be my family. Let me be yours." "Yes." Clara's voice broke on the word. "Yes, yes, yes." They held each other under the stars, knowing tomorrow could bring death. But for now, they had this. They had each other. And sometimes, that was enough. Dawn came too soon. They approached Copper Creek from the north, using back trails Winona remembered from her years of sneaking out. The town was quiet, still sleeping, unaware of what was coming. The asylum loomed ahead. "Remember the plan," Ezra said. "In and out, 15 minutes. If you're not back by then, I'm coming in." "We'll be back." Clara squeezed his hand. "Don't do anything stupid while we're gone." "I'm the one who's supposed to say that." Too late. Clara and Winona slipped through the asylum's back entrance just as the sky began to lighten. The building was silent, its inhabitants still asleep. They moved like ghosts through corridors Winona knew by heart. Past the dormitories where children slept in crowded rows. Past the laundry room where she'd spent countless hours. Past the kitchen where meals were never quite enough. Mrs. Crane's office was on the second floor. Locked as always. But Winona had spent 9 years watching, learning, waiting. She pulled a hairpin from her braid and went to work. The lock clicked open in 30 seconds. Inside the office was exactly as Clara remembered. Austere, cold, full of secrets. "The records are in the bottom drawer," Winona pointed. "She thinks it's hidden, but I've watched her open it 100 times. Clara found the drawer. Also locked. Also no match for Winona's hairpin. Inside were dozens of files. Names, dates, payments, work assignments. A paper trail of cruelty stretching back years. "Got it." Clara stuffed the files into her bag. "Let's go." They made it to the hallway before the lights came on. Mrs. Crane stood at the top of the stairs, a pistol in her hand, and murder in her eyes. "I knew you'd come back," she said. "I told Solomon you would. He didn't believe me, but I knew." Clara pushed Winona behind her. "It's over, Adelaide. Marshal Morrison is on his way. He'll have these files by tomorrow. Your asylum, your cousin's empire, all of it ends now." "Perhaps," Mrs. Crane raised the pistol. "But you won't be alive to see it." She fired. Clara twisted, throwing herself sideways, taking Winona down with her. The bullet tore through the air where they'd been standing. Mrs. Crane fired again, missed again. Then Ezra crashed through the window. He hit Mrs. Crane like a freight train, the pistol flying from her hand. They went down in a tangle of limbs, and Ezra came up on top, his hands around her throat. "Ezra, no." Clara grabbed his arm. "We need her alive. She can testify." For a terrible moment, she thought he wouldn't stop. Thought 9 years of rage would demand its price. Then, Ezra released Mrs. Crane and stepped back, his chest heaving. "Get the children," he said. "Wake them. Get them out." Clara ran. The next hour was chaos. 37 children, aged 6 to 15, were roused from their beds and herded into the cold morning. Most of them didn't understand what was happening. A few of the older ones, the ones who'd been there longest, had hope dawning in their eyes. Winona moved among them, explaining reassuring being the bridge between their old life and whatever came next. She was magnificent. By the time the sun was fully up, the town was awake and watching. Townspeople gathered in confused clusters, whispering, pointing, trying to understand what was happening. And then, Marshal Morrison arrived. He came with a dozen federal deputies riding into Copper Creek, like judgment itself. Old Bear's message had reached him, and he'd ridden through the night. Clara Prescott. Morrison dismounted, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. I understand you have evidence for me. Clara handed him the files. Morrison flipped through them. His expression didn't change, but something hardened in his eyes. This is enough. He looked up. Where's Solomon Blackwood? Here. The voice came from behind them. Blackwood stepped out of the gathering crowd, flanked by Sheriff Boone and a dozen armed men. He looked immaculate as always, perfectly composed despite the chaos around him. Marshal Morrison, what an unexpected pleasure. Judge Blackwood. Morrison's voice was ice. You're under arrest for fraud, child trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder. Blackwood laughed. On what evidence? Morrison held up the files. Blackwood's composure cracked, just for a moment. Then he recovered his face, smoothing into that familiar mask of superiority. Those records were stolen. They're inadmissible. That's for a court to decide. Morrison nodded to his deputies. Take him. Blackwood's men raised their weapons. Morrison's deputies raised theirs. The town square became a standoff. Think carefully about your next move, Marshal. Blackwood's voice was silky. I have powerful friends, territorial judges, state senators. You arrest me, your career is over. Maybe. Morrison didn't flinch. But you're still going to prison. Am I? Blackwood smiled. Or are we going to have a different kind of conversation? Clara saw his hand move toward his vest. Saw the glint of metal. Gun! She screamed. Everything happened at once. Blackwood drew. Morrison's deputies fired. Blackwood's men fired back. And Winona, who'd been standing at the edge of the crowd, picked up a fallen rifle and shot Judge Solomon Blackwood through the heart. The square went silent. Blackwood looked down at the hole in his chest, then up at the 11-year-old girl who'd put it there. You, he breathed. Me. Winona's voice didn't shake. For every child you hurt, for every life you destroyed, for my mother, for my father, for me. Blackwood crumpled to the ground, dead before he hit the dirt. Clara ran to Winona, pulling the rifle from her hands, wrapping her arms around the girl. It's over, she whispered. It's over. Winona buried her face in Clara's shoulder and finally let herself cry. Ezra reached them a moment later, folding both of them into his massive arms. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. They stood together in the chaos of the town square, three broken people who'd found each other, and somehow, against all odds, found a way to win. Marshal Morrison took 3 days to sort through the chaos. Mrs. Crane was arrested. Sheriff Boone was arrested. Half of Blackwood's men were dead, the other half surrendering the moment they realized their master was gone, and the children, 37 of them, were finally free. Clara watched them being processed by Morrison's deputies. Each child interviewed their histories, documented their futures, suddenly uncertain, but at least possible. What happens to them now? She asked Morrison. Some have family. We'll find them, reunite them if we can. Morrison's weathered face was grim, but not unkind. The others will go to proper orphanages, real ones, with oversight. How do we know they won't end up somewhere worse? Morrison looked at her. We don't. That's the truth of it, Mrs. Prescott. System's broken, has been for years. He paused. Unless someone fixes it. Clara didn't respond, but the thought lodged in her mind like a splinter. Unless someone fixes it. That night, they gathered at Martha Chen's boarding house. Martha had opened her doors the moment she'd heard what happened, providing beds and food for Clara, Ezra, Winona, and as many children as she could fit. You're heroes, Martha said, pressing bowls of hot soup into their hands. "Whole town's talking about it." "We're not heroes." Ezra's voice was flat. "We're just people who got pushed too far." "Same thing most times." Martha smiled. "Eat, rest. Tomorrow's soon enough for figuring out what comes next." But Clara couldn't rest. She found herself standing at the window watching the street below where townspeople were still gathered in clusters. Talking. Pointing at the courthouse where Blackwood had held his corrupt auctions. Looking at each other like they were seeing their neighbors for the first time. They could have stopped him. Winona appeared beside her, her small face hard. Any of them. All of them together. But they didn't. They were scared. So was I, for 9 years. Winona's jaw tightened. Being scared doesn't make it right. Clara put her arm around the girl. No, it doesn't. But sometimes it takes someone showing people what's possible before they find the courage to act. You think they'll be different now, that they'll actually change. I think they have a chance to. Clara pulled Winona closer. That's all any of us ever get, a chance. Ezra found them there an hour later, still watching the street. "Grace is fine," he said, answering the question Clara hadn't asked. "Old Bear's bringing her in the morning." Clara's heart clenched. "She's okay." "Better than okay. Old Bear says she's got lungs like a mountain lion and a temper to match." Something that might have been a smile crossed his face. "Wonder where she gets that." "Certainly not from me." "Certainly not." They stood together, the three of them, watching Copper Creek try to figure out what it was without Solomon Blackwood's shadow. "Morrison wants to talk to us tomorrow," Ezra said finally. "Official statement. Might be questions about what Winona did." Clara felt Winona stiffen beside her. "She's 11 years old. She saved our lives." "I know. Morrison knows. But there'll be paperwork. Hearings maybe." Ezra's hand found Winona's shoulder. "Whatever happens, we face it together. Understood?" Winona nodded slowly. "Am I in trouble?" "No." Clara's voice was fierce. "You're a hero, and anyone who says different answers to me." That almost smile crossed Ezra's face again. "Remind me never to make you angry." Too late. The meeting with Morrison happened at noon the next day. Clara had been dreading it. Questions about Blackwood's death. Questions about Winona's involvement. Questions that could tear their fragile new family apart. But when they entered the marshal's makeshift office, Morrison surprised her. "Sit down. All of you." He gestured to chairs arranged before his desk. "We have things to discuss." They sat. Clara held Grace, who'd arrived that morning in Old Bear's arms, healthy and happy, and completely unaware of everything her mother had been through. Ezra sat beside her, Winona on his other side. A family. Somehow, impossibly a family. First things first. Morrison pulled out a stack of papers. The matter of Judge Blackwood's death. Official ruling killed in the line of duty during a federal operation. No charges will be filed. Clara exhaled. Beside her, she felt Winona do the same. "Thank you," Ezra said quietly. "Don't thank me. Thank the 37 children who'll testify about what that man did to them if anyone asks questions." Morrison's jaw tightened. "What he did to those kids makes me ashamed I didn't move sooner." "You didn't know." "I suspected. Should have acted on it." Morrison shook his head. "But that's my burden to carry. Let's talk about yours." Clara tensed. "Ours?" Mrs. Crane's records show systematic fraud across the entire territory. Orphanages, boarding schools, government programs, all of them infiltrated by people like her. People taking money meant for children and pocketing it while kids starved. Morrison leaned forward. "I can arrest the criminals. I can shut down the worst offenders. But I can't fix the system. Not alone." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the territorial government wants to establish an oversight commission. Someone to inspect these institutions. Someone to advocate for the children. Someone who knows firsthand what's at stake. Morrison's eyes moved between them. I'm saying they want you. The silence stretched. Us, Clara finally managed. We don't have any official qualifications. You exposed the largest child trafficking operation in territorial history. You faced down a man who owned judges and bought sheriffs. You put your lives on the line for children who weren't even yours. Morrison almost smiled. In my experience, that's better than any qualification a school can give you. Ezra leaned forward. What would this mean exactly? Travel, investigation, authority to enter any institution housing children and inspect their conditions, direct line to federal law enforcement if you find problems. Morrison spread his hands. It won't be easy. People will fight you. People like Blackwood with money and power and things to hide. But it would make a difference. A real difference. Clara looked at Ezra. He looked back at her. 9 years ago, he'd lost his daughter to a system that treated children like property. 2 weeks ago, she'd watched her own daughter being auctioned on courthouse steps. They knew better than anyone what was at stake. Can we think about it? Clara asked. Take all the time you need, but Mrs. Prescott. Morrison's voice softened. Those children in the square. The ones you saved. They're not the only ones. There are hundreds more across this territory, maybe thousands. Children with no one to speak for them, no one to fight for them. He paused. Until now. They left the meeting in silence, walked through town without speaking past the courthouse, past the asylum, past all the places that had tried to destroy them. Finally, at the edge of town where the road led up into the mountains, Ezra stopped. What do you think? He asked. Clara looked at him, at Winona, at Grace in her arms. I think we've been running since the moment we met. Running from Blackwood. Running from bounty hunters. Running from the past. She took a breath. I'm tired of running. This wouldn't be running. This would be fighting. Fighting for children like Winona, like Grace, like all those kids who have no one. Clara's voice strengthened. That's worth fighting for. It would be dangerous. Everything worth doing is dangerous. Clara almost smiled. Besides, we're apparently good at dangerous. Winona spoke up for the first time. I want to do it. They both turned to look at her. Those children in the asylum, they were my family for 9 years. They protected me, helped me survive. And there are more like them everywhere, scared, alone, thinking no one cares. Her gray eyes, Ezra's eyes blazed with determination. I want to be the person who shows them someone does care. Someone's coming. Someone won't give up. Ezra's throat worked. You're 11 years old. So, you started looking for me when you were 29. You never stopped. 9 years. Winona lifted her chin. I've got a lot of catching up to do. Clara laughed. She couldn't help it. This fierce, brilliant, stubborn girl who'd survived 9 years of hell and come out fighting. She's definitely your daughter, Clara told Ezra. Unfortunately. But he was smiling, really smiling for the first time since Clara had met him. All right, he said. We do this. Together. All of us. All of us, Clara echoed. All of us, Winona finished. Grace, not wanting to be left out, made a loud gurgling sound that might have been agreement. They stood at the edge of Copper Creek, the town that had tried to destroy them, and chose to start building something new. The wedding happened 3 weeks later. It was small, simple. Nothing like the grand affairs that Copper Creek's wealthy families threw. But it was theirs. Martha Chen provided the food. Old Bear performed the ceremony he'd been ordained by some traveling preacher years ago, and nobody questioned whether it was still valid. Winona stood beside Clara as her witness. The 37 children from the asylum, now scattered among foster homes and proper orphanages across the territory, sent letters of congratulations that Clara kept in a box she'd never throw away. Ready? Old Bear asked as Clara stood before him, Ezra at her side. "I've been ready since I pulled him out of a snowdrift 8 years ago," Clara said. "Just took us a while to figure it out." Ezra's hand tightened around hers. "I knew. I just didn't deserve it yet. And now I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to." The ceremony was short. The vows were simple. But when Ezra slipped a ring onto Clara's finger carved from wood and inlaid with stars, just like Juanietu's blanket, she felt something settle into place. Family. Real family. The kind you chose. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Old Bear's deep voice carried across the small gathering. "You may kiss each other." Clara grabbed Ezra's face and kissed him like the world was ending. The small crowd cheered. Grace shrieked with what sounded like approval. And Winona, standing off to the side, was crying. "Hey!" Clara went to her immediately. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Winona wiped her eyes. "Nothing's wrong, that's why I'm crying." She looked up at Clara, then at Ezra. "I never thought I'd have this again, a family, people who wanted me." Ezra knelt before his daughter, taking her hands in his massive ones. "I will always want you. No matter what happens, no matter where life takes us, you are my daughter. You are loved, and nothing will ever change that." Winona threw her arms around his neck. Clara joined them. Grace caught between their bodies, 4 people holding on to each other like they were the only solid thing in a shifting world. And maybe they were. The work started the following month. Morrison was true to his word. He provided credentials, authority resources. He also provided warnings. "You'll make enemies," he told them. "People with money and power who don't like being told how to treat children in their care. People who will try to bribe you, threaten you, destroy you." "Let them try," Clara said. Their first case was an orphanage in Wyoming. Reports of abuse. Children disappearing from the rolls. Government money vanishing into administrators' pockets. Clara went in first, posing as a potential donor. Winona went with her, ostensibly her young ward. What they found was worse than Copper Creek. Children locked in cells for minor infractions. Food withheld as punishment. Labor that would have broken adults. And records that showed a systematic effort to erase Native children's identities, just like what had happened to Winona. They gathered evidence. They alerted Morrison. They got the children out. And when the administrators tried to flee, Ezra was waiting. "Going somewhere." His voice stopped them cold. The arrests were made. The orphanage was shut down. 23 children were rescued and placed in proper care. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Over the following year, they became legends. The Stone family, people called them. The ones who showed up when children were in danger. The ones who couldn't be bought, couldn't be threatened, couldn't be stopped. Clara became the face of the operation, the one who did the talking, the negotiating, the public appearances. She testified before territorial legislatures. She wrote letters that got published in newspapers. She stood before crowds of skeptical politicians and told them exactly what was happening to children in their districts. Some of them listened. Some of them changed. Most of them just got out of her way. Ezra was the force behind her. The one who kicked down doors when doors needed kicking. The one who stared down corrupt sheriffs and compromised judges. The one who made sure that when Clara promised consequences, those consequences arrived. And Winona, growing from 11 to 12 to 13, became something none of them expected. She became a symbol. "This is what survival looks like," Clara would say at her speeches, Winona beside her. "This is what strength looks like. This is what hope looks like." And people listened. Because there was Winona, living proof that children could survive the worst humanity had to offer and still come out fighting. Grace grew too. From infant to toddler, to a fierce little girl with her mother's red hair and her stepfather's stubbornness. She learned to walk in a dozen different towns, said her first words in a Wyoming courthouse, took her first steps in a Montana trading post. She was raised on the road surrounded by danger and purpose and love, and she thrived. On Winona's 14th birthday, they returned to Copper Creek. It was different now. The asylum had been torn down, replaced by a school. The courthouse had been rebuilt, its auction block turned into a garden. Sheriff Boone was long gone, replaced by a man named Thomas, who'd been one of the townspeople too scared to act all those years ago. "You've done amazing things," Thomas told them. "Whole territory's different because of you." "It's not enough," Clara said. "It'll never be enough." "No, but it's more than nothing." Thomas looked at the garden where the auction block had stood. "I think about that day sometimes. The day they tried to sell your daughter. I was in that crowd, watching, doing nothing. I remember. I've spent every day since trying to make up for it." Thomas met her eyes. "You gave me that chance. You gave all of us that chance." Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and walked away. Ezra found her later standing at the edge of town, where they'd once fled for their lives. "Thinking too hard again," he said. "Always. About what this time?" Clara looked out at the mountains. The same mountains that had sheltered them. The same peaks Ezra had called home for 9 years of grief and searching. "About whether any of it matters," she said quietly. "We've helped hundreds of children, changed laws, shut down corrupt institutions, but there's always more, always another asylum, another corrupt official, another child being hurt. And there always will be." Ezra's arm came around her. "But that doesn't mean we stop fighting. Doesn't it ever exhaust you, the endlessness of it? Every day." He turned her to face him. "But then I look at Winona and I see the girl who survived 9 years of hell and came out strong enough to change the world. I look at Grace growing up, knowing she's loved, knowing she's protected. I look at you." His voice roughened. "I look at you, and I remember that 3 years ago I was ready to die. I'd given up. I was going through the motions of living, but I was already dead inside. Ezra, you saved me." His eyes burned into hers. "Not just my life, my soul, my reason for existing. You showed me that loss doesn't have to be the end, that broken things can be put back together." His hands cupped her face. "That's why we keep fighting, because somewhere out there is another man like me ready to give up. Another woman like you with everything being torn away, and maybe, if we're lucky, we can reach them before it's too late." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "When did you become so wise?" "Somewhere between getting shot and getting married." That almost smile crossed his face. "I've got a good teacher." That night they gathered for Winona's birthday dinner at Martha Chen's boarding house. Martha had outdone herself. Food covered every surface. Chinese dishes, Western dishes, native dishes, Old Bear had contributed. It was a celebration of everything their strange, wonderful family had become. "Make a wish," Clara said, as Winona bent over her cake, 14 candles flickering. Winona closed her eyes, concentrated, then blew. Every candle went out. "What did you wish for?" Grace demanded. At 3 years old, she had no patience for secrets. "Can't tell you. Then it won't come true." "That's stupid." "Grace," Clara reprimanded, but she was fighting a smile. "It's not stupid," Winona said, pulling her little sister onto her lap. "It's hope. You keep it safe inside where no one can take it away." Grace considered this with the gravity only a 3-year-old could muster. "Okay, but you should still tell me. Maybe when you're older." "How much older?" "A lot older." "That's not fair." "Life's not fair." Winona tickled her. "But sometimes it surprises you." Ezra caught Clara's eye across the table. In his gaze she saw everything they'd built together, everything they'd survived, everything they still had to do. And she saw something else too. Peace. Not the peace of inaction, not the peace of giving up, but the peace of knowing exactly who you were and what you were fighting for. The peace of family. Later that night, after the food was eaten and the presents opened, and Grace had fallen asleep in Ezra's arms. Winona found Clara alone on the boarding house porch. "Can I tell you something?" Winona asked. "Always." Winona sat beside her, this girl who'd been a stranger 3 years ago and was now a daughter in every way that mattered. "I remember her now. My mother. I didn't think I ever would, but I do." Winona's voice was soft. "I remember her face, her voice, the way she smelled like wildflowers and wood smoke." Clara's throat tightened. "How?" "The song. Every time Papa sings it, I remember a little more. Pieces coming back like a puzzle putting itself together." Winona looked up at the stars. "I remember the last thing she said to me, before the soldiers came." "What was it?" "She said, 'Remember you are loved. No matter what happens, no matter how far away I am, you are loved.'" Winona's voice cracked. "I forgot for 9 years, but I remember now." Clara pulled her close, and they sat together under the stars, a mother who'd chosen a daughter, and a daughter who'd found her way home. "You are loved," Clara whispered. "No matter what happens, no matter where life takes you, you are loved." "I know." Winona's arms tightened around her. "That's what I wished for. When I blew out the candles, I wished that every child in the territory would know what I know now." "That's a big wish. That's why I'm not telling Grace. It's going to take a while." Clara laughed even as tears streamed down her face. "We'll make it happen," she said. "Together. Promise. I promise." They stayed there until Ezra came looking for them, Grace asleep on his shoulder, his face soft with a love that had taken 9 years and unimaginable pain to find. "Coming inside?" he asked. Clara looked at her family, at the man who'd saved her daughter and found his own, at the girl who'd survived the unsurvivable, at the baby who'd been sold on courthouse steps and was now sleeping safe in her father's arms. "Yeah," she said, "we're coming home." They walked inside together, 4 people who'd been broken by the world and had chosen to put each other back together. 4 people who'd learned that family wasn't just blood and birth and biology. Family was choice. Family was showing up. Family was fighting for each other when the world tried to tear you apart. And that kind of family, the kind you built from the wreckage of your worst days, was stronger than anything fate could throw at it. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead. The same stars that had watched over Copper Creek when Clara had begged for her daughter's life. The same stars that had guided Ezra through 9 years of searching. The same stars that had seen Winona survive the unsurvivable and emerge stronger than anyone had a right to be. Inside, 4 people slept peacefully, dreaming of all the children they would save, all the battles they would fight, all the love they would build. The world was still broken. The system was still corrupt. The fight was far from over, but they would face it together. And together, they were unstoppable. Because in the end, blood didn't make them family. Choosing each other did. And that choice, made in desperation, forged in fire, sustained through love, changed everything. Not just for them. For every child who would ever need someone to fight for them. For every lost soul who would ever need someone to find them. For every broken person who would ever need proof that starting over was possible. The Stone family had proven something that Copper Creek, that the whole territory, would never forget. That love was stronger than cruelty. That hope was stronger than despair. That ordinary people pushed too far could change the world. And they had. One child at a time. One fight at a time. One choice at a time. Together. Always together. Until the very end.